Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Robert. I'll be your host. This is the New York History and Culture Trip overview that we'll be taking when we visit New York, April 28th through May 1st. If you're watching us live, we always welcome people to introduce themselves in the Zoom chat or the Q&A. You can let us know your first name, where you're connecting from, and what's the number one place you would like to visit. Perhaps it's New York, or perhaps it's somewhere else. My name is Robert. I will be your host. Let's go ahead and get started. So this program is being recorded. So if you have to drop off at some point in time, or if you want to listen to it again later to kind of catch some of the details we go over, it'll be on our YouTube channel, which is Washington, D.C. History and Culture. I'll send out the link probably tomorrow, so you can be on the lookout for that. So you don't have to take perfect notes for everything that we'll be discussing because, again, the program will be recorded and you can listen to it later if you want to. And so I love New York City. I think it's a really amazing place. This is me in Times Square, and I have actually a family connection to New York City. My dad used to work for AT&T, and he worked at 195 Broadway, which is just a few blocks from the World Trade Center site. And so this is actually me and my dad on the right when we went back to visit his old office building. So we lived there for 2 years when I was a kid. Well, we lived in New York City. My dad commuted into we lived in New Jersey. My dad commuted into New York City. And so that was kind of my first experience with New York. And let's see, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about our trip. If you are coming on our trip or thinking about coming on our trip, it'll kind of give you an overview of some of the things that we're going to be checking out. If you're not going to be coming on our trip, you could still listen to this program and kind of get maybe some suggestions or pointers on things to see and do in New York City. And then if you're not even coming to New York City and just kind of want to learn more about it, you can listen in as well. So the program is kind of geared towards people that are going to be joining us on our trip, but it's not exclusively just for them. Just kind of a few quick New York City type of things. Our particular trip is going to be focusing on the borough of Manhattan. There's 5 boroughs in New York City: Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. So most of our time we're going to be spending in Manhattan for this particular trip. It's my wife, Michelle, from a previous trip. So this is actually the 4th trip that we've organized to Washington, D.C. The first 3 were before COVID. And so there's just a lot of stuff to see and do. It was a lot of fun having people come down. We're a Washington, D.C. based organization. So a lot of people came down to check things out from D.C. And we previously went 2 times over Thanksgiving weekend, and the 3rd time we went over the summer. And Thanksgiving is really an incredible time to visit New York City because everybody's in the Christmas spirit. This is one of my favorite things. This is the Salvation Army team, and singing Christmas carols as they're collecting donations. So here's what we're going to be doing on our particular trip. I've scheduled 8 different events that we're going to be seeing over 4 days, and we're going to be doing 2 events a day. So 2 on Thursday, 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, and 2 on Sunday. And so what we'll do for this program is we'll talk about these 8 particular things, along with a few others that may be of interest to you that you might want to check out either on our trip or at some point in time in the future. Now, this is what I like to call a buffet style schedule. And what I mean by that is you can come join us for any number of these 8 events or activities we're going to be doing. You don't have to join us for all 8 of them. In the past, when we did these tours, we had, I think, between like 25 and 35 people join us at some point in time during the trip. And there were a few people that joined us for every single thing. There were some that only joined us for 1 or 2, and then some for, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5. So it's really up to you. You're free to come and go as you please. These are basically just the things that I'm going to be going to check out, and you're welcome to come along and see them with me or see them with us. But again, it's a buffet style, so you don't necessarily have to go to every single thing that's on the schedule. The reason why we have 2 events a day is because to kind of give you some free time if you want to run off on your own. When we did our previous trips, we had kind of like every single hour scheduled during the day, and people were kind of running off and doing things on their own anyway to either, I don't know, see their family or go do something that wasn't on our schedule. So we kind of booked in some free time, or you can also get some rest, things like that. So on Thursday, we're going to start off Thursday morning. We're going to go see the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. Then we're going to go, that's in the morning. And then later on in the day, we're going to go to the Staten Island ferry ride. And we'll go check out the sunset from Battery Park. On Friday, we're going to go see Frank Sinatra's hometown, Hoboken, New Jersey. And then in the evening, we're going to walk the High Line and check out the sunset from there. On Saturday, we're going to talk about the New York City Underground Railroad, and then we're going to visit a really interesting site that actually a lot of local New Yorkers have not been to, the African burial ground. And then in the evening, we're going to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, check out the sunset from there. And then on Sunday, we're going to wrap up our trip with a talk about Jacqueline Kennedy and her life in New York City and walk around Central Park. And then we're going to wrap things up in the evening, going through Harlem and looking at some sites associated with Malcolm X. So here's what we'll do. I'll go through and talk about these 8 particular sites over the next, I don't know, several minutes. And then when we get to the end, I'll kind of go through some logistics of the trip as far as like maybe some suggestions or things to kind of think about throughout our program. If you have any questions or comments or things like that, you can type them in the chat in the Q&A. I'll probably answer most of the questions though at the end, just to kind of keep things rolling. And then plus sometimes people ask questions that we're going to be answering a little bit later on anyway. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start off on Thursday morning, and we're going to be checking out the 9/11 Memorial. Now, the schedule I feel is pretty firm, and so, but you would want to check out the Eventbrite site for the latest information. I did make one minor change to the schedule, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We're not going to be going to the Met Cloisters as I had originally planned, but our first event or activity is on Thursday morning. We're going to go visit the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. And one of our members actually is a docent at the memorial, and she's volunteered to give us a tour of the memorial, the outdoor space. And this particular site is 2 different kind of venues in the same or similar locations. There's the 9/11 Memorial, which is the outdoor space, and then there's the 9/11 Museum, which is the indoor space. Our friend has offered to give us a free tour of the 9/11 Memorial at 11 o'clock on Thursday morning. So you can come down and check that out. I don't have the exact meeting points for these events. I'll do that in the next few days. So just kind of hold off the kind of where are we meeting type of stuff. We'll send that out a little bit later. And of course, you probably remember where you were on September 11th, 2001, the day that changed the world. And of course, New York City played a very important role in the events of 9/11. So the World Trade Center site has been redeveloped. There's the Freedom Tower, which is really spectacular. That's it there in the center. And of course, it provides a great backdrop for the memorial. And then here is the memorial. It's basically the footprints of the World Trade Center site. And this is really spectacular. If you've not seen this before, this is one of the top things to see in New York City. And so what we'll do is we'll walk around this site. And then, like I said, our friend who's a docent there will give us a free tour of the memorial space. And so just really incredibly moving to visit this site and just kind of take it all in. And it's, I'll just kind of go through the pictures and let you take it in yourself. It's somewhat self-explanatory. So there's people already asking questions of things that I've already discussed in the event description. So if you haven't read the event description yet, you need to really do that because that has all the details. So people are asking like, what hotel are we staying? Things like that. So that's in the event. Basically, you're going to make your own hotel reservation. So you want to read the event description if you haven't done so already. If you've been to or heard me talk on one of our programs about Washington, D.C., I always recommend when people are visiting the monuments and memorials in Washington, D.C., if they can, to visit them both during the day and the night, because they have a really different kind of effect, so to speak. And same thing for this. If you get a chance, you might not have the time, but if you get the chance and have an opportunity to do so, you really should visit the 9/11 Memorial both during the day and in the evening, because it takes on a whole different kind of atmosphere, I guess, or the essence of it is a little bit different in the evening than it is during the day. So just kind of give some pictures to show you the difference between the two. It's really just like, it's almost like going to a whole different site, just because it's very different during the daylight hours and the evening hours. So if you have time, you might not be able to do that or fit into your schedule, but something for you to think about. And then the museum is also an aspect of this. Now, our friend, the docent, is only giving us a tour of the memorial. If you want to go to the museum, you're free to do so. You'll need to make arrangements to do that on your own. You'll have to purchase a ticket. The memorial is free. The admission to the museum is not free. There's a small fee associated with that. And for the most part, all but one of the kind of organized official events we're doing are outdoors. I'll explain the one that isn't a little bit later. And we're doing that because of COVID. When I originally planned this tour, I was hoping to go to places like the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Whitney Museum of Art and the MoMA and the History Museum and stuff like that. But because of COVID, most of the official things that we're doing are outdoors. But you can visit the museum on your own after our tour. She estimates it'll take about an hour to go through the memorial. And then once we're done, you're free to go off on your own, or you can really go check out the museum. I really do recommend visiting the museum if you are already down there. Again, it's one of the most highly rated tourist attractions in New York City. And so just here's some pictures just to give you kind of a sense of some of the things that they have on display there. She estimates that people should spend a half a day at the memorial and the museum, just because there's so much to take in. But as far as the timing goes, that really depends on the individual. Some people can go through a museum very quickly. Some people like to stop and kind of read everything or take pictures. So it's kind of hard to give estimates on how long a person should stay at any particular venue, but she really recommended like a half a day. And we're meeting, I think the tour starts at 11 a.m. of the memorial, if I'm not mistaken. And so again, just kind of some pictures. So even if you're not going to be able to come join us on this trip, kind of give you an overview of some of the things you might be interested in seeing on a separate trip that you might be able to make by yourself at some point in time in the future. This is an interesting section, Canine Courage, the roles that dogs played in the rescue. And some personal objects of people that were killed in the attack, including a wedding ring. And then the museum has a exhibit that also very interesting. It focuses on the hunt for and death of Osama bin Laden. And so another aspect of the museum experience. So this particular part of the exhibit is showing about how did they find out who was responsible for this in terms of the people that were involved, and what were they doing in the days, weeks, and months leading up to 9/11. And then how do they end up going to track them down? You may remember that they were able to track bin Laden through his courier. And then this part has to do with raiding the compound. And then, of course, bin Laden is killed. So that's the 9/11. So we're doing that in the morning on Thursday. Now, in the afternoon, I thought we'd do kind of like this is more of a touristy thing, going on the Staten Island ferry and then walking around Battery Park. So if you're a local New Yorker, you've probably already been on the Staten Island ferry a bunch of times, and it might not be something that you want to go join us with. I forgot to mention the tour is really open to anyone. there you can come by yourself, you can come as a couple or a family or whatever. It's open to people that are local and also people that are from out of town. And so in previous trips, we had kind of an interesting mix of locals and also quite a few people that were from out of town. So for the locals, they might not sign up for this just because a lot of them probably already been on Staten Island Ferry. But if you haven't been on the ferry before, it's really cool and it's free. So the Staten Island Ferry is one of the world's busiest ferries. It operates between Manhattan and Staten Island. Remember, I showed you the map that had where the 5 boroughs were. It runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The distance between Manhattan and Staten Island is a little over 5 miles. Usually the ferries run every 30 minutes and the travel time is about 25 minutes. And then here's the best part, or one of the best parts, it's free. And then it has really great views. So this is why we're doing this, because it has such incredible views, especially if you've not been to New York before. So here's one of the Staten Island ferry boats. And then when you're on the ferry, one of the things that's really cool is you can either sit inside, or if the weather's nice, you can sit outside. So it's really up to you. The boats are really large, so you can just kind of go through and sit wherever you want. I've been on the ferry myself a number of times, but I guess I haven't done it enough yet where it's boring yet, because I usually try and do this every time I go to New York City. It's just a fun thing to do. And then a quick geography lesson. So here's Manhattan, and here's where you pick the boat up at. And again, for the specific events, we'll post later on where we're meeting at. So we don't have all those specific details just yet. We'll work on that a little bit later. And then this is the route that the ferry takes, this blue line. And then this is New Jersey over here. Here's Ellis Island. Here's a Statue of Liberty. And then it ends over here at Staten Island, and you get off the boat and then you can get back on and go the reverse route or vice versa. And one of the things that's amazing are the views from the Staten Island Ferry. So here's a picture with the Manhattan skyline in the background. You can see the Freedom Tower. And then here's another picture. So I like doing this just because the views are so amazing. Again, it's free. And also too, I like doing this because if you're visiting New York, you're probably walking around a lot. And if you go to sit on the Staten Island Ferry, you can take a rest and just kind of sit back and enjoy the view. So this is kind of a good activity to do later on in the day, in my opinion. After you've been traipsing around New York City and Manhattan, your feet, legs, and back might be a little bit tired. You can come plop down on the ferry and have it cruise around the water, checking out these different things. This is Ellis Island. Quite a few people, I forget the exact percentage, but a lot of Americans have ancestors that pass through Ellis Island. I do myself. And so the Staten Island Ferry cruises right by here. It doesn't stop at Ellis Island. You have to make separate arrangements if you want to go do that, but it does go by pretty closely, so you can get a view of that. And then if you do have ancestors that came from Europe and came through Ellis Island or Asia or anywhere else, if they went through Ellis Island, they probably came this way. Their boats back in the day would have sailed up through here, or I should say traveled up through here. And so the boats are kind of taking the similar route that you would be taking on the Staten Island Ferry. And so just to kind of orient yourself, here's Manhattan. And then the ferry would start over here and kind of work its way down. And then so you can see this is Ellis Island right here. And then this is the Statue of Liberty right here. And then this is New Jersey over here. And so the boat, like I said, cruises right by those two important historical sites. And so if you had ancestors that came to Ellis Island, they would have sailed up through here, and then they would have disembarked over here. So you kind of almost getting like a view that your ancestors would have if they came through Ellis Island. And so just some historic photos. I mean, imagine how amazing that would have been to be on the boat and seeing the famous Statue of Liberty, or looking across over at the New York skyline, which was a little bit lower back then. And here's where the immigrants were processed. This is the main hall of Ellis Island. So we're not going to this on our official trip. Reason being is we're not doing many things that are indoors because of COVID. But I've been to Ellis Island before. Really recommend you checking this out. It's another great thing to see. And this is the hall today. So if you can kind of imagine all these people that were processed through here and allowed to enter the United States. And it's really interesting to come learn about immigrants and the immigration process and things like that when you visit Ellis Island. Let me go back. This site's run by the National Park Service, so they do a great job. And you can spend quite a bit of time just kind of traveling through here. It also has a great view of New York City. And then I'm really honored and flattered because my ancestors have their picture hanging up at Ellis Island. So my dad's family is Hungarian. All four of my dad's grandparents were born in Hungary. And this is actually like a collage of photos. And this is actually our family photo up here that my aunt worked to get put on display in Ellis Island. So that's pretty cool. This is actually let's see, this is my dad's grandmother right here. So that's pretty amazing. And the ferry also passes right by the Statue of Liberty. It gives you this incredible view of the Statue of Liberty. And I don't know about you, but I never get tired of looking at the Statue of Liberty. It's so amazing and historic and significant. I just really love passing through here on the ferry, checking out the Statue of Liberty. And so this is pretty much the view that you're going to have. Maybe not quite this close. This photo was zoomed in, but it's incredible to be on the ferry and cruising right by the Statue of Liberty. Again, if you're a New Yorker, probably have done this before, maybe even quite a few times, depending on where you live. But if you're from out of town, if you haven't been to New York before or haven't been there very often, the Staten Island Ferry, really cool thing to do. And again, it's free, so you can't beat that. I really recommend going to the Statue of Liberty if you haven't been there before. Here's the boat again. So, this could be you up here on the ship and looking out over the Statue of Liberty. Or I guess you could be down here also. You stopped off. And it's also neat going through here because there's all this different traffic on the water of different boats doing different things. And then if you do want to go to Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island, you don't take the Staten Island Ferry. You have to take a whole separate boat. You can either take it from Manhattan or New Jersey. They'll bring you over here, drop you off. You kind of look around. You can go to either or both on the same trip. And again, just really a beautiful view of the Manhattan skyline from there. And hey, who doesn't want to go look at the Statue of Liberty up close in person? And so again, this could be you. So we're not doing this on our trip again because of COVID, but you of course are free to go check it out on your own. And then this is the view from the Statue of Liberty. So even if even if they didn't have the Statue of Liberty there, which of course they do, it would still be worthwhile to go over there just because it has such a beautiful view of the Manhattan skyline. And then here's the spectacular Freedom Tower right here. So this picture was actually taken from the Statue of Liberty site. And then what we'll do, at least for our group, is we'll sail from Manhattan over to Staten Island. And again, the ride takes about 25 minutes. We're actually going to take a 30-minute break because even though the ferries run every 30 minutes, it's too tight to try and cruise over and then get on the other ship in like 5 minutes. Kind of think of like an airport with a connecting flight. You have to give yourself a little bit of time budget wise to be able to switch planes. So same thing. So we'll start off in Manhattan, take the ride over to Staten Island, then we'll have like a 30 or 35-minute break before the next boat departs, and then we'll turn around and go back to Manhattan. And we'll end up in a place called Battery Park. That's the official name is now just the Battery, but most people call it Battery Park still. And it's right here on the tip of Manhattan. And so it's this beautiful park setting, and you can see all the tall building here. Here's the Freedom Tower. Here's the Empire State Building back here. Here's the Brooklyn Bridge, where we'll be walking over a little bit later during our weekend. And one of the things that's nice to do in Battery Park is check out, they have a lot of really amazing outdoor sculpture. So this one was actually from the World Trade Center. And then they have all different types of sculptures honoring or memorializing different people or events or things like that. So really, if you like outdoor public art or sculpture, this is a good place to go just because they have all these different types of art objects on display. And you can also see the Statue of Liberty from Battery Park. And it's got a really nice view of New Jersey across the water. So you can sit out and read a book or rest or things like that. And the reason why I wanted to go over here is because I wanted to see the sunset from this particular spot. So I've been to Battery Park before, but I haven't seen the sunset from here, and I've heard it's really beautiful. So I thought it would be nice to take a break from walking around, sit on the ferry, have that cruise us past the Ellis Island Statue of Liberty, then walk around Battery Park, check out some of the sculptures, and then watch the beautiful sunset. So that's the end of day one. Now, initially on Friday morning, I had scheduled a trip to see the cloisters. So I had to cancel that for a couple reasons. Number one, the COVID cases are really increasing quickly, and I think we'll be safe being outside if we take some precautions. But that being said, I didn't feel comfortable having a large group going inside the museum. The Met itself actually is also not too keen on having large groups come and visit. When we had our previous trip to New York City, I think we had like 30 or 35 people roaming through the Met. And so they didn't complain about it, but just because of the COVID situation, they're a little bit leery about big groups joining. So that's the story with that. So if you are interested, we'll go to the cloisters on our next trip, whenever that'll be, hopefully maybe later this year. So that was on hold. So apologies if that was like the number one thing you were hoping to see, but we do have some other cool stuff to go visit. So I thought what we would do is go to Hoboken and see where Frank Sinatra grew up. Now, initially we were going to do this on Saturday, but because we canceled the cloisters visit, I thought we would switch it to Friday morning. So Friday morning, we'll go over to Hoboken. If you're staying in Manhattan, there's a lot of different ways to get there. You can take the subway. It's probably the most convenient way. And Frank Sinatra, born in 1915, passed away in 1998. We have a music history program on Frank Sinatra. Unfortunately, we don't have another one between now and our trip. But Hoboken, welcome to Hoboken, birthplace of baseball and Frank Sinatra. And so again, Frank was born here. And Hoboken has a lot of historic sites. It's been around for a long time, right across from New York City. Here's a map. And what they do is they have a self-guided walking tour. So I've not been on this myself. I've read this brochure and I'm pretty familiar with Frank Sinatra, and I'm kind of virtually familiar with some of these sites. Some of the sites I have seen, but not all of them. So I thought what I would do myself is go on a walk and check out some of these Frank Sinatra related sites. And so if you want to join us, more than welcome to come down and see some of these things. So this won't be like a tour per se, where I'll be or someone will be talking the whole entire time, but I think we can still have a good time nonetheless. Here's a photo of Frank's parents on their wedding day. Frank's father was a fire captain at the local fire department, and Frank's mom actually ran a bar, of all things. And so you can go check out the sites for those. And this is actually the Frank Sinatra birthplace. This is a modern building. This is not the building he was born in. That building was torn down many, many years ago. But this is the site where he was born. And this star here signifies that a star was born here. See, Francis Albert Sinatra. And then if you go inside, they have this mural. So this is the Frank Sinatra birthplace, Fort 15 Monroe Street in Hoboken, New Jersey. And then these are the homes that Frank's family lived in. So after he was born, his family moved here, and then they moved here, and then here. So just kind of an interesting progression of the homes. There's a lot of really cool photos of Frank Sinatra as a young man, including a mugshot when he ran into a little trouble with the law. He met his wife, Nancy, there. They ended up having 3 kids together. So very young Frank Sinatra. And of course, this is where his entertainment career begins. Back in Hoboken. And of course, he hits the big time, moves out to Hollywood, and becomes this iconic entertainment figure, not only in music, but also film and television and fashion and et cetera, et cetera. So Frank Sinatra all started in Hoboken, New Jersey. And just last year, on his birthday in December, they put up this statue honoring Frank Sinatra. So I wanted to go see this. This is new. And if you go here, this also has a really nice view of Manhattan. Here's the Empire State Building over here. You can't see it in this photo, but the Freedom's Tower is over here to the right. And then this is the woman that designed the sculpture. This is a frequent selfie slash photo spot in Hoboken. And then here's a close-up of it. So you can go to Hoboken and learn about Frank Sinatra. And there's a lot of cool restaurants to eat there, like a lot of Italian restaurants and pizza and all that kind of stuff. So maybe you can get a bite to eat while we're over there. So that's Friday morning. Go learn about Frank Sinatra. And then we'll have a break in the afternoon. And then in the late afternoon, we're going to walk along another really New York-esque type of place, the High Line. And I wanted to go walk through here. I've been on the High Line before, but I've not seen the sunset. So I thought we would go do that. If you're not familiar with the High Line, it's a 1.45-mile long public park built on a historic freight rail line elevated above the streets of Manhattan's West Side. Safe from demolition by neighborhood residents in the city of New York, the High Line opened in 2009 as a hybrid public space where visitors experience nature, art, and design. The High Line is open daily from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. No reservations are currently needed to visit. And so back in the day, New York City was already kind of built up when the railroads were invented, and they really had to figure out how to squeeze railroad lines into the city. And so one of the things they did was they had these elevated train lines, which they have in some other cities as well. So here's a picture of that. So imagine all these trains rumbling in and out of the city all day long. And over time, these elevated lines were replaced by tunnels, and so they didn't need these elevated tracks anymore. Here's the Empire State Building again. And so they stopped using the elevated rail line and they turned it into this really cool urban park that you can go walk through. And so I've done this before. We actually did this on our one of our previous trips. We actually walked through here on Thanksgiving. It was a lot of fun. That's how we spent our Thanksgiving. And so there's all different types of trees and flowers and plants and stuff like that. Sometimes you almost kind of forget that you're in the middle of a big city. And this is also really highly rated or highly regarded things do by both locals and tourists. And so a great place to walk. So if you do the full one end to the other, it'll be 2.9 miles. I'll have to see how it goes if we end up doing the whole thing. I think we could do at least a mile and a half or 2 miles. I'm not sure if we'll end up doing the whole thing or not. We'll see how it goes. If you end up, most of these sites that I'm talking about, you're always free, of course, to go visit them at some other point in time during our trip if it's more convenient for you. Just wanted to point out some things about the High Line. There's a lot of places to sit and take a break. So if you're thinking, oh gosh, I can't walk 1.45 miles or 2.9 miles round trip, that's okay, because they have these places along the way that you can stop and sit down and take a break. And different spots. There's people hanging out. Good place to get your picture taken. And there's a lot of public art sculptures along the High Line as well. So if you like art, another good place to see it. And it's really interesting just to walk through and get kind of this elevated view. You know, most of the time that you're in New York City, you're walking around the street level. And so this is neat because you're up above and you can kind of look down and see what's going on. So you have a different vantage point than you would if you were walking around. And really interesting just checking out all the different architectural details of the buildings. And so the High Line is a place that you should go check out. And as I mentioned, I thought it would be neat to come here and see the sunset. So another sunset for us. And then here's what it looks like. So it's open in the evening if you wanted to check it out at night as well. And then if you're not familiar with New York City, this map might not be make a lot of sense, but this is where the High Line starts. And this is where we're actually going to meet somewhere down here. If you've heard of the Whitney Museum of American Art, that's right here. And so the High Line begins here. It travels all the way up here. We might stop here and turn around and go back just because I think there's going to be quite a few people that can't walk the whole 2.9 miles, but it actually ends over here. Now, if you want to walk one way, you can always go from here to here, and then you can take a cab or the bus or the subway or something back wherever you need to go. So if you don't have to walk the whole round trip, you're free to walk half of it or one way, et cetera, et cetera. And then a place that I really recommend checking out either before or after our trip to the High Line is this really awesome food hall called the Chelsea Market. This is another place that I've been. It's one of my favorites in New York City. I forgot to mention, as far as getting around the city, the quickest way to do it is to take a cab or something similar, but it can be a little pricey. Your other options are taking the subway or the bus. I actually never take the subway myself if I can avoid it. I prefer to take the bus. The reason being is because sometimes it's really cool to sit on the bus and look out the window. Whereas if you're in the subway, you can't really see much of anything. And so I prefer to take the bus as opposed to the subway. But this is the Chelsea Market, is a food hall, shopping mall, and office building located in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. The complex occupies an entire city block with a connecting bridge over 10th Avenue. Chelsea Market was constructed in the 1890s and was originally the site of the National Biscuit Company, also known as Nabisco. It was the factory complex where the Oreo cookie was invented and produced. The complex was redeveloped in the 1990s and features a retail concourse at ground level with office space above. And so let's go check out the Chelsea Market, either virtually or online. So again, this might be good for you to go visit for dinner before our walk, or you can always stop by afterwards as well. They have pretty extended hours. And there's just all these different food vendors that you can go to. So if you've not been to a food hall before, it's really a great experience because there's all these different choices to select from. And so they have quite a few different things to tempt you here at the Chelsea Market. Everything from breakfast foods. They open at 7 a.m., I believe. Pizza, lobster rolls. They have desserts and coffee drinks and alcohol and pretty much almost anything you can think of. And if you want, you could maybe save yourself some time by doing maybe a little bit of research before you show up, because here's the map and you can see all these different places. Now, of course, it is fun to walk through here and try and decide what you're going to eat, but it can be maybe a little bit overwhelming just because there's so many great choices. I mean, look at these pictures. How would you even decide what you're going to eat here? So there's quite a few things. And this is just some of the pictures, of course. There's many, many places to choose from. This is actually the buildings down here. And then you can see on this picture, this is actually the High Line. So it goes right into the Chelsea Market. So that's why it's a good place to go either before or after we start our walk. So if you're a foodie, you want to check that place out. And then another thing you might want to go do either before or after our visit or our trip on the High Line is go see the Whitney Museum of American Art. They have one of the world's great collections of modern American art, or in other words, art from the 20th and 21st centuries. Highlights of their collection include the Ashcan School and Edward Hopper. They actually have the world's largest collection of artworks by Edward Hopper. And here's what I wanted to point out. The museum is open throughout the week, but on Friday, They open at 10:30 a.m., but they're open till 10 o'clock at night. So that's pretty neat. There's not, sometimes when you go to a city to visit, there's sometimes not a lot of stuff open at night that you can go check out, but you can go to the Whitney because it's open at 10 o'clock at night. And another either advantage or disadvantage, depending on your perspective, is the museum admission, which I think is normally $25 in the evening, starting at 7 o'clock. It's what they call pay what you wish, meaning you don't have to pay $25. You can pay a penny, you can pay $10, you can pay $25, you can pay $1 million if you want to. It's pay whatever you want to get in. Now, I'm not sure how crowded this is going to be. So I guess the advantage and disadvantage of going to the Whitney on Friday night is, number one, it's going to be free. The downside is it may be a little bit more crowded than if you were to go on Friday afternoon or in the morning. So you might want to, if you don't want to be around a lot of people, you might want to visit earlier in the day. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if you do want to take advantage of the free tickets, you have to reserve them in advance. So something for you to keep in mind. And the Whitney has this really spectacular building right along the water. This is it right here. Here's the water over here. If you remember when the airplane landed on the Hudson River, that was out here. And it's a multi-story building. And you can see it's got all these outdoor terraces. This is the High Line. So notice the elevated walkway. So convenient place to meet. And it has all these outdoor spaces you can go visit. People hanging out, having a good time, enjoying the view. So if you like art, particularly American art, you probably want to check out the Whitney during your trip if you can. It has great views of the city. Here's the Freedom Tower again. So I'm just not sure if you're going to want to visit on Friday night or go some other time. I'm not sure myself what I'm going to do. That's why I didn't make it an official event for our group to go see. Gonna have to ponder that one. And then just to give you kind of examples of some of the great modern American artwork they have on display. I actually do a live stream program on the collection of the Whitney. I'm probably not going to have time to do it before we visit, but I'll do it again at some point in time in the future if you're interested. They just really have I really like American art, and they really have an incredible collection of it here at the Whitney. And it focuses on art from the early 1900s to the present. And so some of the things. So kind of in the sake of time, I'm not talking about a lot of sites that we're not officially visiting on our trip with our organized group. I just wanted to mention this one just because it's right by where we're already going to be when we do our Highline walk. And then also, of course, the Friday is pay what you wish. A lot of the museums, if you're coming from Washington, D.C., which I know a lot of people in our group are in D.C., you really get spoiled with the Smithsonian and all the free museums they have. And there's most of the museums in New York are not free. However, a lot of them have different times of the week where the admission either is free or it's the pay what you wish model. So that's something for you to keep in mind if you're on a budget. Two great Georgia O'Keeffe paintings. And they had a lot of great artwork by Edward Hopper. The world's largest collection of Edward Hopper's artworks is at the Whitney, including this cool painting of New York. So that concludes our Friday, where we started out learning about Frank Sinatra and Hoboken, and then we went on the walk of the High Line. So on Saturday morning, what we're going to do is we're going to go check out a site called the African Burial Ground. And then I also thought we would go see some sites connected to the Underground Railroad in New York City. In New York City, here on the map, was a hub of Underground Railroad activity. Frederick Douglass, when he escaped slavery, the first place that he came to was New York City. And the gentleman that helped him in this endeavor was named David Ruggles. He was a very important figure on the Underground Railroad. They have a lot of stuff throughout the city that's connected to the Underground Railroad. The one challenge is because New York's such a big city, a lot of the items are spread out. So like, for instance, this particular sculpture is really great to see. But this is up in Harlem, which is kind of at the opposite end of Manhattan from where we're going to be when we visit the burial ground. So there's a lot of sites to see in the boroughs of New York City that are connected to the Underground Railroad and also in the surrounding area, but we're going to have to kind of pick and choose which ones we're going to go to. This gentleman, Thomas Downing, he owned a famous oyster restaurant in New York City, which also was a stop on the Underground Railroad. So I thought what we would do is go do a short walk, visit some of these sites in New York City that are either connected to the Underground Railroad or people that were involved in the Underground Railroad. And then once that's over, go actually visit this site called the African Burial Ground National Monument, which is a place that not a lot of New Yorkers have been to. I mean, quite a few have, but there's quite a few people in New York City that have not been to this before. It's a very sacred space. The African Burial Ground is the oldest and largest known excavated burial ground in North America for both free and enslaved African. It protects the historic role slavery played in building New York. And so this is the site right here. So what happened was they were building these office buildings, and during the excavation of the ground, they discovered all these bodies that had been buried, and they started doing archaeological work and discovered that they were African Americans, and this site had been lost to history, so to speak. So finding the bodies was a surprise. This was from back in the day when New York City was much smaller. So this started off when New York was really just Manhattan, the tip of the island here. And this is the Wall, which is now Wall Street, and the burial ground outside the Wall over here. A place of remembrance from the 1690s until 1794, an estimated 15,000 enslaved and free Africans were laid to rest in the African Burial Ground. In 1991, during construction of the Ted Weiss Federal Building, 419 human skeletal remains were exhumed. The rediscovery of the cemetery sparked vigorous efforts to preserve this hallowed ground. And then it goes on to talk about the site. So they really just kind of stumbled across this. It had been lost to history. There's kind of three main features of this site. There's the circle, and then the ancestral chambers, and then the actual burial sites are right here. Then there's also a museum as well. And I really like the educational kind of aspect of this site. It says, "Hey, New York, reflect on all of those who built our city." And then if you scroll in this text here, if you can't read that, I zoom in for it. It says, "For all those who were lost, for all those who were stolen, for all those who were left behind, for all those who were not forgotten." So again, I thought we would walk around initially and look at some of the Underground Railroad related sites that are in this area. And then after that, come visit this site. We have to do this on Saturday because this is not open on Sundays. Just a FYI, if you're not going to be able to join us on Saturday, but you still want to go see this, it's not open on Sundays, unfortunately. It's open, I think, Thursday through Saturday currently, if I'm not mistaken. So a very important site to see. And then you can go inside. They have a museum that has a lot of interesting exhibits. I like this site because I think for many people, when they think of slavery, they think of people living on these big cotton plantations down south. And while a number of enslaved people were in that situation, a number of enslaved people were in urban areas like New York, doing urban type things, not picking cotton. And so reclaiming our history, the African Burial Ground in New York, the Africans who helped build this city rest in sacred ground. And so again, there's quite a few similarities similarities, but also quite a few differences for people that were enslaved in an urban environment like New York. And I can kind of summarize the similarity with the fact that this life was also very horrific and grueling. These are people that are working extremely hard and doing all different types of urban things, like these domestic activities displayed here. And so interesting to see how people lived during this time. This is an interesting part of the exhibit. This is a barrel, and this is basically showing you how heavy it was to do this type of manual labor all day. So the goal is to push this heavy barrel up this plank like workers would have had to do all day long, day after day, week after week, year after year. And it's really heavy. And so it's hard to push it up the plank. So interactive in that regard. This is another interesting aspect of the museum. I'm not going to read all this, but it just talks about all the legal systems or structures that were in place to limit the movement and things like that of African Americans. Like, for instance, slaves may not leave their master's house on Sunday without written passes. No slave or indentured servant shall sell or trade in any item whatsoever. No slave shall play games or be disorderly on the Sabbath, on pain of whipping, et cetera, et cetera. This is a little bit maybe hard to read if you're not familiar with these types of charts, but this is interesting. This shows the life expectancy. So in addition to the African Americans that were found here, there's also another site kind of from a similar time frame called Trinity Church. And those sites, those burial sites contain European Americans. And how you read this chart is basically showing you that when they've analyzed the bodies of the people that they discovered at the African burial ground with records they had of people that were at the Trinity Churchyard, the life expectancies were much, much different. So like, for instance, the orange line here represents African Americans. So only 8.2% of African Americans that were discovered at the site were of the age 55 or above. Well, at the Trinity Churchyard site, 30.5% of the Europeans that were discovered were over the age of 55. So, almost like 4 times as many people that were Caucasian lived to the age of 55. So the life expectancy for these enslaved peoples was much shorter than their free counterparts. This is a rendering of one of the burial ceremonies. And then this is actually a kind of like a photo collage of bodies that were discovered here. So I'll zoom in. And for these people, they don't really know oftentimes very much about them. So man, 17 to 18 years, man, 24 to 28 years, child 6 to 10 years, da 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 da. And again, there's this big wall of all these people that were discovered here. They reinterred the bodies. Someone asked about that earlier. Those are in the space, the outdoor space. And then this is a recreation of what like a funeral service experience would have been. So just interesting to go here and again, kind of get a little bit maybe different take on the kind of more familiar Southern plantation slavery compared to say this urban slavery that was taking place in New York. And then also too, just kind of interesting to see how people lived back then. What kind of things did they eat? What kind of clothes did they wear? What kind of activities were they doing, whether they were enslaved or free? So that'll be in the morning and afternoon. And then I thought in the evening we would continue our sunset walk series by walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. This is, again, another thing that quite a few New Yorkers have done. But a lot of New Yorkers have never walked across the Brooklyn Bridge. So if you're visiting from out of state or out of town, you can check this off your bucket list. The Brooklyn Bridge is a hybrid cable stayed slash suspension bridge in New York City, spanning the East River between the boroughs of Manhattan and Brooklyn. Opened on May 24th, 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge was the first fixed crossing of the East River. It was also the longest suspension bridge in the world at the time of its opening, with a main span of, let's see, almost 1,600 feet and a deck that's usually about 127 feet above the water. If you want to walk across it, it's 1.1 miles each way, or 2.2 miles round trip. And how many people walk across the Brooklyn Bridge? Well, quite a few New Yorkers do. I don't want to make it sound like no one walks across the bridge that lives in New York City, I guess. But my point is, I've met quite a few people from New York and asked them, "Have you ever walked across the Brooklyn Bridge?" And quite a few times people will say no. So I think sometimes maybe they just do it if they have a reason to do so. With 30,000 pedestrians and 3,600 bicyclists cross the Brooklyn Bridge every day. When the bridge opened, it was a really kind of proud moment, not only for New York, but also this the United States in general. A lot of people were thinking that the bridge could not be built just because of the conditions there. We've kind of grown accustomed to the fact that we know that engineers can pretty much build anything that needs to be created, but not so much the case back then. So kind of a lot of fanfare was centered around this. I can't really maybe think of something similar in modern times that's been created. I mean, this was almost kind of like the moon launch or something. Just there was just so much pride and excitement centered around the bridge when it finally opened. Probably, it's definitely one of the most famous bridges in the world. Probably this bridge and maybe the Golden Gate Bridge, two most famous bridges in America. And of course, it's a photographer's dream to come here and take pictures. David McCullough wrote a book called The Great Bridge. So if you're a reader and want to read up before our trip or maybe afterwards, you can check out the David McCullough book. And then Ken Burns did a documentary that was kind of sort of based on the David McCullough book. And actually, this was Ken Burns' very first documentary. If you thought the Civil War series was the first one he ever did, no, that was actually quite a few years after he started his career. So Ken Burns, when he graduated from college, the very first documentary he did was on the Brooklyn Bridge. And here's a couple of photos of Ken from back in the day. And so what we're going to do is we'll start off in Manhattan. Again, I don't have the exact meeting point just yet. We'll get that a little bit later, but what we'll do is we'll start off in Manhattan. We'll walk across the Brooklyn Bridge to Brooklyn. Then we'll take a short break and then we'll turn around and walk back. And it's just really beautiful, iconic structure, historic. And if you like architecture, this really has a lot of amazing details. And here's the pedestrian route. Now, one word of advice, if you are going to be joining us on this, you really got to pay attention to the signs. So for instance, notice in this particular section, the bicyclists are on the right side and the people walking are on the left side. Now this is a little bit different depending on where in the bridge you're at, but you really got to be paying attention to what other people are doing. If you want to take photos and stuff, you got to kind of observe what other people are doing in terms of which direction they're going and what lane they're in. You don't want to get run over or yelled at or something like that. So keep that in mind. And again, a lot of really interesting architectural details. Again, here's the Freedom Tower back here. Now, one thing they're really particular in New York, just as you'd expect, about littering. So be very careful about that. And then also, I don't know, people do this thing where they put these locks on bridges and stuff. And you don't want to do that here. They've really had a pretty extensive campaign to deter people from doing that. And I don't even know why people do these, because the city is just going to come through and with bolt cutters and cut them off. And so the people are going to put the lock on there and it's not going to be on very long. But you don't want to get a fined or get in trouble for doing something that you're not supposed to do. And then it's a popular picture spot, as you can imagine. So you can take your selfie or have someone take your picture. At any point in time during our trip, if you want me to take your picture for you in front of something, let me know and I'll do the best I can based on the number of requests we have. Now, one thing you got to really, again, pay attention to the laws and the rules and what other people are doing, and don't do anything crazy. So every like maybe once a year, someone gets arrested for trying to go out onto some part of the bridge where you're not supposed to be and trying to take a picture like this guy. So don't be this guy. You're not allowed to walk on this part of the bridge. You have to stay to areas like this and take your picture. So don't do anything crazy like this because you'll get arrested and bad things will happen. Just kind of as a public service announcement, your host, your trip host, also known as me, I don't have bail money for you if you get arrested. So if you do get arrested for taking a selfie on the bridge where you're not supposed to or doing something crazy, don't call me because I'm not going to bail you. So the Brooklyn Bridge goes between Manhattan and Brooklyn. And there's a lot of really cool stuff to see in Brooklyn. We're not really going to be spending much time over there on this particular trip just because of the length of time we're in the city. But at some point in time, I was thinking maybe we could go back and spend a whole entire weekend in Brooklyn, just checking out all the cool stuff there is to see over there. When that's going to be, I have no idea, but I'll kind of file that away in your memory bank if you want to explore Brooklyn a little bit more, which is really kind of like the cool place to go be in New York City in a lot of ways. We'll do that on a future date. And then when you get to the Brooklyn side, what we'll do is maybe we take like a half an hour break so people can rest or take pictures or get a snack or something. And one of the advantages of walking over here is got really spectacular view of Manhattan, kind of similar to the High Line. You can walk one of the ways and then take the bus or the subway or whatever the other way. So you don't have to walk the whole entire round trip. If you're really limited, you could always walk. What some people do is they walk part of the way over and then they turn around and go back. So they get kind of their mile in just by doing that. So they start off and end up in the same place. And again, just really has these incredible views of the skyline. And it's always neat to be in New York and watch all the different boats that are traveling through. But what I wanted to see was the sunset. So wanted to go check out the sunset on the Brooklyn Bridge. And so that's what we're going to be doing. So that's why we're walking this particular time of the day. And that will be a wrap on our Saturday program. And then on Sunday, we're going to go check out Central Park and learn about Jacqueline Kennedy's life in New York City. So we've done quite a few different programs on Jacqueline Kennedy. They've typically usually focused on her life in Washington, D.C., but she spent a number of years in New York City. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to go check out the sites associated with her. And oh, this is so we did when we went on our last trip, it was in the summer. It was the summer before COVID, I think. And when we walked around Central Park, and boy, people really loved it. Some people actually ended up walking around Central Park again on their own, just because they liked it so much. Jacqueline Kennedy, born 1929, passed away in 1994. And Jacqueline Kennedy was actually the early years of her life were really centered around New York City. She was born in the Hamptons, which is east of New York City. And here's Jackie on the right. Here she is with her parents on the left. So early on in her life, things were centered around New York City. And this is actually the building that she was living in during her childhood. It's a very historic building. You can see it sold 5 years ago for $25 million. Actually, 25.25 million, and that was before the housing boom. So who knows how much it's worth now? So this, of course, is a picture not from when she lived there, but just to kind of show you some pictures of the home that she lived in when she was a little girl, just to give you kind of a sense of New York history and culture. You can see it's been modernized since she's lived there. But a lot of people don't know that Jackie spent her childhood in New York City. Eventually, what happened though, her parents got divorced and her mom remarried. And the guy that her mom remarried, he was based down in Washington, D.C. So then Jackie moved to D.C. And then she married John F. Kennedy and became first lady and all that kind of stuff. Then, of course, he was killed in Dallas. And then she ended up staying in D.C. for a little while after she moved out of the White House, but a few months later, she ended up relocating to New York City, kind of to get a fresh start. This is one of the most famous photos. Jacqueline Kennedy, this is actually taken in New York City. If you've seen this before, it's usually known as Windblown Jackie. And there was, so a lot of people in New York City just kind of left her alone, but she did get quite a bit of media scrutiny, particularly from the paparazzi, like this guy chasing her down the street. And I'm not into celebrities, but if you are, there's a lot of celebrities live in New York City. You can be on the lookout for them. Of course, you're not going to see Jackie because she passed away, but she really played an important role in the city, as far as like culturally and having an impact on historic preservation, things like that. So I thought we would talk about some of these aspects of Jacqueline Kennedy's life as it relates to New York City. This is actually her on the Staten Island Ferry. So she she didn't take the Staten Island Ferry on a regular basis, but hey, she went on at one time, so it's good enough for her. It's good enough for us. Here she is. You can see the Trade Center in the background. This was an event that she went to. So she went on the Staten Island Ferry. It's another famous photo of her from the New York years. And she actually met the love of her later life in New York City. Most people know about John F. Kennedy, of course, and Aristotle Onassis, but she was involved in a few other romantic relationships along the way. And this gentleman was her beau in the latter years of her life. And she met him in New York City. We'll talk a little bit about them. This is actually her son, John Jr. This is the day when she died. He came, there basically was kind of like a vigil outside her apartment. And the press and fans and stuff were, and people were just interested. And so he came out and finally announced that she had passed away. She'd been battling cancer for quite some time. And the last few weeks and months of her life, her health really went downhill. So this is John Jr. Stepping outside of her apartment, announcing to the world that she had passed away. And this is that apartment. This is the apartment that she lived in after she left Washington, D.C. Even when she was married to Aristotle Onassis, she still kept this apartment. And then when she split up with him, she ended up just staying here full time as opposed to kind of going back and forth between here and Greece. This is her apartment up here on the. And then if you want to see pictures inside, here's what it looks like. So if you ever wondered what Jacqueline Kennedy's apartment in New York City looks like, well, here you go. It looks very Jackie-esque. This picture is actually was from a magazine, and so this was like the dividing lines. That's why it has this dark vertical line. That's actually not the photo, but this was like one page, and this was the other page. That's why that's there. But it kind of looks like what you'd expect a Jacqueline Kennedy apartment to look. There's all kinds of art and books and antiques and flowers and beautiful wallpaper and rugs and all different kinds of cool stuff. Christopher asks, are we going to be able to go into Jackie's apartment during our trip? Unfortunately, Christopher, no, we will not be able to see the inside of Jackie's apartment, I don't believe. We'll hold hope out, but it's, of course, owned by other people now. It's no longer in the Kennedy family, so I don't think we'll be going inside. It's not a museum or anything like that. It would make a really cool museum, though. It's too bad that they weren't able to do that. Piano, wood floors. Look at all the books. You can tell she read a lot. You can really learn a lot about a person when you visit their home, and you kind of get this. Someone said I went through the. Jane said I went through the pictures too fast. Sorry, Jane. So here's the outside. This actually faces Central Park, and then here's the inside. So I'll go a little slower. I was thinking at some point in time I'll do like a online program about Jacqueline Kennedy's time in New York City to talk about all the different aspects. This is just kind of like the highlights of her life there. We'll talk more about it during the walk if you're able to join us. If you're not able to join us, don't worry, we'll do a online version of it someday. So pretty elegant looking. all kinds of artwork. She kept quite a few items that belonged to her husband, John F. Kennedy. Um, I saw a list of kind of like an inventory of the things that were in the apartment when she died. Like she kept his golf clubs, which I thought was interesting. She kept John F. Kennedy's golf clubs. And then this is not the view from her apartment. She's up on the top floor. She's got the penthouse suite, basically. This is from an apartment from lower down the building. It was for sale a while back. But it does kind of give you a sense of what the view would be like. So this is Central Park right here. This is now the Jacqueline Kennedy Reservoir, was named that after she passed away. And then, of course, here's the skyline. So this is not the view that Jackie had from her apartment. It would have been much nicer because she would have been several floors higher up. It does kind of give you a indication of like what it would have been like. And then this is Central Park, the famous Central Park, and it has this big reservoir. And after Jackie passed away, they named the reservoir after her. Her apartment is over here. Just to orient yourself, this is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. You should try and check that out during our trip if you can, although we're not officially going there. Here's the Empire State Building. And so what I thought we would do is go check out a few of these sites in the area that are connected to Jackie, and then walk around this reservoir, which is really beautiful. So it's one of the top things to see in Central Park, and has nice views of all the different architectural aspects of the surrounding area. And so this will be our Sunday morning activity. And of course, there's always people out walking and jogging and biking and all that kind of stuff. And as I mentioned, the Met is in the kind of the outskirts of Central Park. So after we're done with our program, if you still are not too tired, or maybe some other time during our trip, you can always check out the Met. They also, of course, have a really fabulous art collection. I didn't have time to pull a bunch of the paintings and sculptures and stuff they have on display, but this is probably the most famous painting that they have on display, Washington crossing the Delaware. This is a massive artwork that you would like to go see in person if you get a chance. This is also one of their most popular paintings. This is Madam X by John Singer Sargent. And of course, they have a great Impressionism collection and Asian art and African art and all that kind of stuff. And then I thought for our last activity, we would go check out Harlem and see some of the sites associated with Malcolm X. Hold on for just one second. Okay, there's a little bit of information on Harlem. So we talked before about the 5 boroughs of New York City. There's Manhattan, Staten Island, Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. Harlem is not a separate borough. It's a portion of Manhattan, or the Manhattan borough. That name was originally Dutch. And of course, it's home to a number of famous people and places and events, including the Apollo Theater. And Malcolm X resided in Harlem for a good portion of his adult life. And so I thought what we do is go check out some of the sites in Harlem that are related to Malcolm X. Malcolm X had a really fascinating life, and he has kind of these different stages of his life, which are all very, very different. So there's his early childhood, then there's kind of his, he got into some legal trouble a little bit later in life. Then he joined the Nation of Islam. Then he slipped from the Nation of Islam and went and did his own thing, kind of over here, but it's really fascinating individual. If before our trip you have time and you want to read up on Malcolm X or study up on him, you can always read his autobiography, which was assisted with that endeavor with Alex Haley, or you can watch the Malcolm X film. That was what actually prompted me to want to go see the sites on this trip, as we actually screened Malcolm X a few weeks back. Perhaps some of you saw us then. And this is not Malcolm X himself. This is Denzel Washington, of course. But you can always watch the Malcolm X film before we go on our trip. if you want to kind of familiarize yourself with some of these sites that we might be visiting. And then here's Malcolm. The reason I made this category is most people, when they think of Malcolm X, they think of the time where he was in the Nation of Islam. However, his views really changed quite a bit after he left the Nation of Islam. He's a really interesting person in the sense that his I don't know, his philosophy or his kind of a outlook on life really changes a lot during these different stages of his life. And so when we go visit the sites in Harlem, it's going to kind of center around these two times. Here he is speaking. This headline says, "Our freedom can't wait." This is a mosque that he was responsible for. It's one of the things that Malcolm X was very effective at doing. He wasn't just out getting media headlines. He was organizing, building, creating mosques and drawing a lot of new members into them. And so this is one of the most famous ones. This is in Harlem. And then this is the site where he was actually killed, the Audubon Ballroom. It's a historic structure. You can see the car, the indication of the time of this photo. And this picture was taken after he was killed. And so he came here to deliver a speech, and he was assassinated at this site. Of course, that was big headline news. To me, it's always disappointing when they talk about the three people that were killed during the 1960s. They mention John F. Kennedy, then they say Martin Luther King Jr., and they say Robert Kennedy. And it's really disappointing to me. They oftentimes exclude Malcolm X from the list of important Americans that were killed in the 1960s by assassination. This site has been repurposed. It's not a ballroom anymore. And one of the things that's really neat about New York, really has a lot of beautiful architectural details on different buildings, not just this one, a lot of them. But this is the Malcolm X Educational Center. And there's a nice sculpture of him inside. And again, this is the ballroom where he was killed. And then there's a lot of different interesting outdoor art in Harlem as well, as you can imagine. This is a mural. See Malcolm X over here. So we'll go to Harlem and learn about Malcolm X. Okay, let's do this. So I just kind of talked about the 8 things that we're going to focus on during our trip, and kind of a few other interesting things you might want to go see either on this trip or in the future. Let's kind of go through some miscellaneous stuff to kind of wrap up loose ends for our trip, and then we'll call it a day or an evening. If you joined us late, this program is being recorded, or if you want to listen to it again, I'll just kind of get more of a feel for what we're going to be doing. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel, probably not until tomorrow, though. I'll send out the link for it if you want to watch it. I didn't provide like the street address and stuff for these places where we're visiting or the meeting spot, because we'll do that a little bit later. If you're not familiar with it, this is actually the first trip we're going on, New York. Later on in the month of May for Memorial Day weekend, we're going to Dallas, Fort Worth to see a bunch of historical and cultural stuff down there. If you're not familiar with this trip, we're going to be going on Memorial Day weekend to see the John F. Kennedy Memorial, the JFK Sixth Floor Museum at Daley Plaza. We're going to be going to the George W. Bush Presidential Library Museum, the Dallas Museum of Art, the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, the Kimball Art Museum, the Fort Worth Stockyards National Historic District, downtown Dallas Art District, and of course we'll be doing dining, walking, shopping, etc. Hopefully COVID will be a little bit more under control then. If you want any information on this trip, it's on our event calendar, just like this one was. If you're in New York City, we actually going to be starting to do more in-person events from different people that are going to be local hosting events. You can join us. Our meetup group is called New York History and Culture. I'll paste the link in the chat, and you can go check it out. Hold on one second. So if you're watching us live on Zoom, I've posted the link for our New York History and Culture meetup group. In addition to this trip, we'll have other in-person events coming up. Like, for instance, a while back, we had an in-person trip to the Whitney Museum that some friends of ours organized, and we'll do some other things as well. And then if you aren't familiar with the exact logistics of this particular trip, I posted the link for that in the chat as well. And then I also wanted to mention a website that I really like. You might have heard me reference before that has a lot of great information on touristy type stuff is TripAdvisor. And so I'm going to post the TripAdvisor link for New York City in the chat if you're watching us on Zoom. This was actually the event that we had before COVID. It was a trip to the beach and a walk along the beach. And again, we start off our trip on April 28th and we conclude May 1st. Now, as I mentioned, this whole trip is like a buffet type thing. So if you have to leave a day early or you're going to show up a day late, that doesn't matter. Just come whenever you want to. I'm pretty much just picked things that I want to go do and see, and you're more than welcome to come along. Just kind of a recap of our schedule. On Thursday, we're going to start off going to the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and then later on the day, we're going to go on the Staten Island Ferry and go on to walk around Battery Park to see the sunset. On Saturday, this is a little bit of a schedule change because of COVID. We're going to go see Frank Sinatra's Hoboken in New Jersey. And then later on the day, we'll go walk the High Line and check out the sunset from there. Then on Saturday, we're going to go to the Underground Railroad sites and see the African burial ground. And then later on in that evening, we'll go walk the Brooklyn Bridge. And then on Sunday, we'll go check out Jacqueline Kennedy's New York and Central Park, and then also Malcolm X's Harlem. And as I mentioned, this is a buffet schedule, so you can pick any or all of the items you want. Let's just do some logistics. So this is in the event description, and I did not update the event description either. The event description that's on Eventbrite now, I have to tweak it. I'll do that either tonight or tomorrow. It still has that we're going to the cloisters, which is not correct. We had to cancel that because of COVID, unfortunately, but there's some additional information that's on the event description. Let's just go through this, and then when we're done, I'll try and answer any questions that people might have. So you're welcome to RSVP for this one or any of our other trips. Even if you're not sure you're going to go, it doesn't matter to me one way or the other. So feel free to do so if you just want to stay informed on what we're going to be doing. Just as a FYI, I'm vaccinated and boosted, and I fully support people wearing masks as needed. I'm not sure I currently wearing masks anytime I'm indoors. I'm not sure what I'll do for the outdoor walks and stuff. We'll just have to see how it goes. Because of the COVID situation, all the activities that we're doing as our group are outdoors, with the exception of the African Burial Ground Museum, which is kind of like an optional thing. As I mentioned before, this is like a buffet style trip. I've scheduled a series of events, and you are welcome to join us for any or all of them. Arrive and depart whenever you like. That, in terms of the days of the weekend or the timing or whatever. So that's fine. Like, so for instance, if we're walking the High Line or the Brooklyn Bridge and you get tired and want to take a break and venture off on your own, that's totally fine. You don't have to check in or anything like that. The itinerary has some open times for you to rest and or explore things on your own. And of course, you can always arrive early or stay over if you want to. If you want to show up a few days early, you can. I have to go to New York City for work, so I'm actually getting there a few days early, but I'm going to be busy working for much of that time. And if you want to stay over, you're more than welcome to do so. I'm actually going to be heading down to Washington, D.C. after our trip in New York City. Everyone is welcome to attend, regardless of whether you live in New York or somewhere else. You're free to come. You can come by yourself. Most people actually that come usually are single, or maybe some couples come as well, but you can bring your family if you want to. It's open to anyone who wants to come. We're not collecting any fees from you to participate in this travel program. It's just strictly a schedule of events, and you are free to come and go and do whatever you want. If you want to make a gratuity or a donation to support our nonprofit programs, you're more than welcome to do so. It basically, so we try and make as many of our programs free, including this one. There's not a lot of ways that you can go see a big city like New York for free, but we're trying to make that happen for you. Now, here's some important things. Each participant is responsible for obtaining all their own transportation and accommodation, airfare, hotel, etc. So we're not doing that for you. That's why it's free. We're not a travel agency, and I don't have the free time to organize people's hotel and airfare and all that stuff. If you are traveling, myself, I always get reservations that I can cancel, so there's no financial penalty whenever possible. I recommend you do the same in case you're into some kind of problem. If you want recommendations on hotels and stuff, I don't have recommendations for you. Just go to Expedia or Travelocity or Hilton.com or something like that. It's not like we have a hotel that we're all staying at. That's kind of how this trip is set up. We've done this in the past and it seems to work fine. We basically just set up the schedule for the events, and then people have to make their own transportation and accommodation, because some people crash with a friend, some people want to do an Airbnb, some people want to I don't know, stay in a nice hotel. Some people, if you want to save money, you could maybe like stay in New Jersey, but you'd have to commute in and out, which could be a little bit of a hassle. So we don't get involved in the hotels stuff at this point in time. Maybe someday we will, but not now. New York City has excellent public transportation options, and therefore a car is not required. As I said before, I always recommend taking the bus if you have to go somewhere, just because you can sit down and look out the window and see things. But if you want to take the subway, of course, you're more than welcome to do so. I posted the link for TripAdvisor. It's a great source for attraction listings. It has pictures and information, recommendations. I posted that link in the chat as well. Or you could also just Google TripAdvisor New York City. We'll provide the exact meeting point prior to the event. So we'll put it on the Eventbrite schedule, and we'll also email it. We don't have exactly where we're meeting at for the High Line Walk and the Brooklyn Bridge Walk and all that stuff just yet. So sit tight, we'll do that later. And then with all of our programs, there'll be zero tolerance for any inappropriate behavior. So what that means is we've had 2 people we had to kick out of our group because they were not behaving themselves. And so hopefully we don't have to do that for anybody on this trip, but we don't have any tolerance for people behaving inappropriately in any way. Let's see, one more page of stuff. Guests travel at their own risk. We're not responsible for any losses you incur on this trip. So keep that in mind, just kind of like traveling on your own. Please note that this group trip is being organized by the nonprofit community organization Washington, D.C. History and Culture, not a travel agency. We're providing all the information we have available at this time, with additional details to be provided later, and we're not providing any additional services. So if there's something else you want, if you want help with your hotel room or booking a flight, you have to do that on your own. We're not a travel service. If you kind of feel like you're a high maintenance traveler, you probably do want to work with a travel agency. I kind of feel like everybody that's going on this trip is an adult and has probably gone on vacation before, or a work trip at least, and should be able to kind of do things self-sufficiently without me having to spend my free time holding their hand. Let's see, anything that can't be determined on your own by the above event description, Google, or common sense, please let us know. And then please be considerate of our time and read all the trip details before contacting us with questions you've already answered. I've already gotten a lot of emails on this trip. 90% of the people that emailed me with questions were things that I already answered in the event description. So I really hope that you're going to be considerate of our free time that we're taking to organize this trip, and not bombarding with questions that we've already answered, things like that. And then also, just, I don't want to complain. I really love doing this history and culture stuff, but I get a lot of communications from people, emails and text messages and voicemails and stuff, and that's fine. But I get way more than I can ever answer. I get literally hundreds of people contacting me a month with asking questions about different things or opportunities, or was this program recorded? Is this going to be repeated? You know, da 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 da. And I'm expecting I'm going to get a lot of messages during this trip, because that's what happened before. I'm not going to be able to answer a bunch of text messages and emails during this trip, because I'm basically on vacation, and I don't want to be spending my vacation responding to a bunch of messages that are kind of like common sense type of things. So these were messages I got from our previous trip. Are we still going on the walk or event? Well, if it's on our schedule and I haven't sent out an email saying otherwise, then yes, we're still doing whatever it is we're doing. Where are we meeting at? When we're in New York City, don't send me a text message or email asking me where we're meeting. That will be in the event description, and we'll also email it. Somebody previously sent me a text message, asked me if it's going to rain. I don't know. I'm not a weatherman. That would be something you could look up on your own. I also had people emailing me, like when we went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. People were texting me, asking me what the address to the Metropolitan Museum of Art was. I got to believe that you can figure that out on your own without having to text me and me having to text you back. Or people ask, what subway line or stop should I use? Again, you have to look that up on your own. I'm giving you as much kind of guidance and information that I can, but some stuff you're just going to have to do on your own. I'm not like a free tour concierge service, unfortunately. And then quite a few times people will say, I'm going to be late. Where can I meet the group? I hate to say it, you can't, because when we start these walks and stuff, I'm not going to be spending my time responding to a bunch of text messages from people that couldn't show up on time. Because what happens is sometimes I end up having to text the people 4 or 5 times before they meet us. Sometimes they don't show up at all. And so once the event starts, I'm not responding to a bunch of text messages or emails or calls from people asking where to meet. If you are worried about that, be on time or show up a little bit early, because otherwise you're going to get left behind. So I hate to be like blunt and not maybe customer service oriented, but I can't be spending this weekend that I'm hosting people responding to like 40 or 50 messages from people asking like, are we still meeting? Where are we meeting? What subway line should I take? I'm running late, da, 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 because I can't have my like phone blowing up during the event, because I'm kind of focused on the people that were able to get there on time. So if you send me a message like that, I'm just not going to respond. I hate to say it, but that's the situation. If you have any questions, just go look at the event description. All the information that you need should be in the event description, or it'll be emailed out if there's like some change of plans, like, oh, it's raining today, we're not going to such and such, we're going to go to somewhere else. We'll email that if that's going to be happening. So as long as you have your phone with you and you can pull up the Eventbrite website or check your email, you should be in good shape. Now, if you do have some kind of emergency and you do need to get a hold of me, then that's fine. But if it's just kind of some regular run of the mill thing, like what's the address for the, I don't know, some place for meeting at, just Google that on your own, please, if you don't mind. All right, so that's the kind of the overview of our trip. Let's see, if you have any questions that I didn't already answer, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A now. And oh, Marlene says, setting boundaries, a good idea. Thank you, I appreciate that. So if you have any questions that I didn't go over, I'm happy to answer now. It's easier for me to answer a question now while I'm on Zoom than it would be to try and send an email a little bit later. So if there's anything I haven't discussed or something you want to know, feel free to let me know. Let's see. Hotel, will you be reserving rooms somewhere? No, I already discussed that. You have to do that on your own. Let's see. Are you and some viewers going to New York City? Are you all going as a group? People are coming from anywhere they're at. So some people are coming from DC. I'm actually going to be coming from Detroit, where I'm going to be before this trip. So people are coming from all over the place. DJ says, I've never been to New York City, so I'm a little excited. Well, that's good. I'm excited too. Bless you. Mary Ann says, have a blessed Easter. Thanks, Mary Ann. You too as well. Let's see. Cindy says, thank you. Oh, here's the me. So again, if you have any questions right now, feel free to type them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll answer as best as I could. Let's see. Mary Ann says, good for you. You shouldn't have to babysit or hold hands for adults. Yeah, I hate to be blunt, but I had a lot of problems before where people, like someone literally sent me a text message asking me if it was going to rain. And I'm thinking, you should be, I'm not a weatherman. You should be able to figure that out on your own. And it actually didn't rain. FYI. Let's see. Oh, Patty says, great tourist picks. Thanks, Patty. I appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, here's a good question. How safe is New York? Well, New York, it's pretty safe. There's usually most places you go, there's a lot of people around, but that being said, I would keep your guard up. I would be concerned about being in a dark place by yourself. All the places that you'll be at with us, there's going to be a lot of people around. And I guess another thing to kind of keep on the lookout for is pickpockets. That really doesn't happen very often, but you don't want to be, walking around not paying attention to your surroundings. I guess the best thing you do is kind of stick with people, be alert and pay attention to your surroundings, especially in light of the event they had previously. Let's see. The additional information on the trip, it's on the Eventbrite page. So I'll post it again. The Eventbrite link has all the details for the trip. So here, I'll post the 3 links again. There's the Eventbrite link, which has all the details, although keep in mind, I have to update the calendar because we canceled the Met Cloisters visit. I also posted our New York History and Culture group in case you're already in New York City. You want to go do more stuff in person, you can check that out. And then also the TripAdvisor site. Oh, here's a good question. I didn't talk about this. How are meals being organized? That's TBD because of the COVID and how many people we have. So that's a really good question. I'm not sure how we're going to handle the meals. If we have 10 people at an event, we may handle things differently than if we have 30 people at an event. In the past, we relied a lot on the locals that were with us to kind of tell us like, oh, hey, there's a really good pizza place that you can get carry out from right around the corner. Or, my friend owns this Chinese restaurant that's a few blocks from here. Let's go there. So we'll have to play the meals by ear would be, but that's a good question. Thanks. I didn't think to answer that. Will a detailed itinerary be emailed prior? No, because it's on the event page. You just have to click on the link that I sent you. Let's see. I'm in Buffalo. I'm excited to see my state. Great presentation. Oh, thanks, Jacqueline. I appreciate that. I like Buffalo. They have a lot of cool stuff in Buffalo, where Teddy Roosevelt was inaugurated. Let's see. I think that answers all the questions. So again, I appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much. Hopefully we'll see you in New York City in a few days. Again, this program is being recorded. I'll send out the link for the recording, but I probably won't be able to do that till tomorrow. And have a great rest of your weekend, or a great rest of your week, I mean. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Stay safe. Have a great rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you in New York City on April 28th. Take care, everyone. Bye.